Hey, what's up? It's your boy 24/7 here with 24/7 Fusion Media. And I'd like to say what's up to everybody out there. Hopefully, everybody's doing well. Thank you for being here. Appreciate y'all. Just just trying to enjoy Wednesday, make sure that I talk a little bit about comics and just looking forward to this, little segment with everybody. So hopefully everybody's doing well. Before I start, I'd like to say what's up to Penny. Hey, how's it going, Penny? She says just popped in, running errands and church. All right. Just popped in to give a thumbs up. All right. Appreciate you. Thank you. And running errands and heading to church tonight. Yo, that's cool. That's. Thank you for coming by. Appreciate that. Thank you so much. And please be safe. What's up, Sean? My man Sean's in the house. We got Lord Thoth. Lord Thoth saying hello to everybody. How's it going, Lord Thoth? My brother, hopefully everything's going well with you. Sean Estep, how's it going, Sean? Hopefully everything's good with you. I'm just just sitting here, just kind of getting ready to show a few things. I noticed when it comes to collecting comics, you'd be surprised what people think is is a legit comic book collection. And there's a few things to kind of go through. And I don't know, some people might agree with me, some people might not. But the whole purpose of this video is to explain what to consider when you're actually getting ready to actually purchase a comic. So at this point in the game, you've decided, hey, I want to collect comic books. I basically figured out what character I'm going to collect. So I have a hero in mind. Hopefully, if you watched the first video that I put out last week, go back, check out the live streams I've done. There's, collecting comic books 101. That's the first video. It's everything to consider before you spend 1 penny purchasing a comic book. And that's basically kind of went through all the ins and outs, all the things to factor in, to consider before you spend 1 red cent with anybody or anywhere, all the factors to consider, and that is, basically figuring out, is this what you want to do? Do you want to collect comic books? If your answer is yes, then the steps that you take afterwards, after you figure out, okay, I want to collect comic books, then you got to figure out, okay, well, who am I going to collect? And there's some people out there, they don't even care about that. They just randomly go out there, any store, anybody, anywhere that has a comic book, they'll sit there and buy it. They don't care if it's good or bad. They'll just sit there and waste their money. Now, if that's you, then, can't tell you what to do with your money. But this series of videos is for people that are, considering collecting comic books. And once they do, what are all the things to factor in before they buy a comic book? And even once they're done with their factoring and they want to go ahead and actually spend their money to buy a comic book, then it gets to be to the point of, okay, what's the next step? All right. So once you figured out that you want to collect comic books, the next step is purchasing the comic. Now, there's different ways to go about this. You can always go to a comic book store, local comic book stores. There's comic book stores all over. Depending on where you live, a comic book store might not immediately be in the area, but I bet you no matter where you're at, there's a comic book store roughly about 30 to 45 minutes in any, in some direction of where you're at. I bet you it's probably safe to say that. So, once you figure that out, now there's two things to consider when you're actually buying a comic book. Now, if you go to a comic book store, more than likely you're going to be basically buying the comic book dollar for dollar. What I mean by that is comic book store is basically trying to make their money. There's been a few times where I've seen that someone would actually come into a comic book store and they actually have some kind of deals or some kind of sales. But for the most part, going into comic book stores, roughly for the majority of my life, when you go in there and you go into a comic book store, they're normally going to charge you the cover price of what the comic book is, unless it's a comic book that's worth some money. Then basically it's up to the comic book store's discretion of how much they want to charge you for that comic book. That's just basically, it's like what it is anywhere. It's like, when you go into a pawn shop, you're going to see basically whatever you want to buy in a pawn shop, you're going to basically purchase it for whatever price the pawn shop decides to sell it for. That same way with a comic book shop. Now, from my own personal experience, the deals come from buying online. Unless you're buying online. Now, again, I've very seldomly seen sales being done at a comic book store. I'll give you an example. I remember I was hanging out with our brother Stone_Loki. We went to a comic book store here a few months ago, and he was looking for the run of Nightfall by Batman. Batman Nightfall. He was looking for the whole storyline of Nightfall. And the lady sold them some comic books, but it was more of like a bundled package. And, it was actually for a pretty decent price. And, he went ahead and purchased it. And again, not a lot of comic book stores that I've seen sell comic books, basically like 10 in a pack, like a 10 comic book bundle pack. I've rarely seen comic book stores sell comic books that way. Why? Because if they're trying to make their money, they'll sell the comic book, comic for comic at whatever price they want to sell the comic book for. Now, again, there's things to consider. Now, if you're trying to buy a comic book for the first time, I wouldn't automatically suggest that you go and you buy a whole collection. If you've never collected comic books before, I suggest that you go and you buy one comic book and see how well you can keep that comic book in some kind of condition. My whole point is this: comic books cost money. And if you're buying a comic book at today's prices, you're basically going to be buying a comic book for about about anywhere between $4 to $6. Because for your basic DC comic right now in 2023, roughly goes for $3.99. Marvel, about $4.99. And then depending if it's like a limited series or something special, they might charge you about $6 or $7 for it. So my whole point is, why would you sit there and buy a whole collection of comics if you don't even know how to take care of one? So basically, when you buy a comic, unless you're a person that doesn't, once you buy it, you don't care how you handle it. You can fucking throw it in the corner and you don't care. That's one thing. But if you're a person that's collecting a comic book and let's say you decide that you want it to be in a bagged and boarded so that it could be preserved, then there's things that you're going to have to learn when it comes to purchasing a comic book. So basically, if you're walking into a comic book store and you're trying to buy a comic book, the comic books are basically, if it's brand new, it's basically going to be sitting with no bag, no backboard, no nothing, just a comic book sitting with a whole bunch of copies of the same comic book all in a row. And basically you just pick one. Now, before you pick a comic book to purchase, look at all the comics before you touch them. Why? Because you'd be surprised when comic book stores get shipments of comics. I've seen it to where even if the whole box of comic books is damaged, they'll take the damaged comic books, put it on the shelf, and expect for you to buy it. So my whole thing is, why are you gonna purchase a beat up comic book? Don't do that. And once you purchase a comic book, they're not taking it back. So at that point, when you're sitting there and you're buying a comic book and you have the comic book in your hand, before you actually purchase it, you need to make sure that the comic book is up to par before purchasing. So if there's any cracks, any creases, or anything like that, then my advice to you is you shouldn't buy it. Why? Because if you're buying it brand new, it needs to come in mint condition. Because if not, you're just throwing your money away. So basically, when you're purchasing a comic book and you see a whole stack of comic books lined up, and you're sitting there and you're looking at it, look at the corners, check out the spine, make sure there's any cracks or creases. I'll give you an example. This comic book has a couple of cracks. You can see them in the reflection. You see those creases across the spine? You can see them in the light, like right there. Now, if you see that in a comic book, and I'm talking about these little cracks and creases in your comic book, that means that your comic book's already damaged. Okay? And the thing is, I'm a hard collector and I'm a real collector, and I understand the whole grading process of grading and what comic book stores, comic book collectors look at when it comes to grading comics. And it goes beyond it being a nice comic book cover. You also have to consider the pages on the inside. Why? Because depending on how somebody kept their comic, somebody might have kept their comic book in the garage for years. And you know what happens when you leave paper out in the weather? What do you think happens with newspaper when you leave it out in the weather? It turns brown. The paper tarnishes. And I'm going to tell you something. When your paper tarnishes in your comic book, that decreases the value of your book. So that's one thing to consider if you're buying a comic book from an individual that had his comic book sitting in the garage. Now, if you're buying a comic book from a comic book store, you have to make sure that the comic book is in mint condition. Now, this comic book is not in mint condition. Why? Because you can see the cracks and the creases in this comic book. That's why this comic book is the example. Now, I have another example over here too. So So if anything, if you're going to learn anything from watching me here, is you're going to understand what it is to purchase a comic book and how to treat it once you get it in your hands and you take it home. Now, first off, is while you're sitting there and you're scoping out your comic book and you figure out what it is that you want to buy. And you're at the comic book store and you're sitting there and you're looking at the comic book you want to buy. It's brand new, it's sitting in front of your face and you're looking at it. Before you touch anything, make sure that your hands are clean. Why? Because you might have just eaten something. You might have just touched something. And even if you think that it's harmless to touch your face and, rub your ear and all that other shit, you're getting oil and grease all over your fingertips. And then from there, you're touching your comic book. And what happens, if you don't even understand this, and I'll explain this, is that grease and everything, oils from your face or whatever, once you have that on your fingers and you're touching your comic books, what happens is you leave fingerprints on your comic books. It gets embedded, like your fingerprints actually it becomes embedded into the cover of your comic. So now when you're looking at your comic book cover, you can see fingerprints all in it, and it ain't something that you can't wipe it out. You can't get like a wet paper towel and wipe that off. So basically, you just destroyed your comic and didn't even know it. So before you even touch a comic, make sure your hands are clean. Because there's no point in you spending $5 to buy a comic. The moment that you fucking you even fucking touch your finger on it, you already destroyed it. Why? Because your hands are dirty. For real. So before you touch a comic book, wash your hands, or sanitize your shit, and make sure your hands are dry and nice and clean. Because the moment you touch your comic book, you're fucking it up. So don't do that. And before I go any further, I'd like to say what's up to my man Psychodorf9. Says howdy y'all. Lovely Sherry. How you doing, Sherry? Thank you for being here. Psychodorf9 says, yup. Same deal, prepping a car for paint. Yeah. Yup. When I collected, I got two, one to read and one to bag. Exactly. So basically, going to the point of my brother Psychodorf9, basically what he's saying is that if there's something that you're going to actually collect, and it's something that you want to collect and you want to read, if it's something that's highly in demand and you're collecting it, your best bet is to buy two copies. Why? So you can have one copy to put away, never to touch, never to put your hands on, never to open up, do anything. Leave it in the backboard, which is one of these. This actually costs 25 cents at a comic book store. So when you're actually purchasing your comic, they ask you, hey, would you like it bag and boarded? And you say yes. They'll charge you extra 25 cents or 30 cents. And what they do is they'll take your comic book, put it in the bag and backboard themselves, or they'll hand it to you so you can do it yourself. Why? Because the guy behind the counter does not want to be responsible for damaging your comic book, because some people are real sensitive about that. They're like, yeah, I'll take a bag and backboard and give it to me. I'll back up my own comic. Why? Because if you ever notice, there's some people behind the counter that once they're sitting there and they're scanning your shit, they're bleep, bleep, and then they're just mishandling your fucking comic, and they don't even give a fuck. And I've seen that happen. So to avoid all that bullshit, they would rather that, they go ahead and bag their own comics. And if that's the case, if that's how you are, because you've had a lot of instances of people damaging your comics, and you'd be surprised. You figure, well, damn, they work in a comic book store. They would have to know how to handle a comic book, and you'd be so surprised that they don't know how to handle a comic book. So you got people that'll personally do it themselves, and that's fine too, But again, that's a service that they provide over at the comic book store. So when you're buying a comic, you ask for a bag and backboard. If they're doing their job, they'll ask you, "Hey, are you interested in buying a bag and a backboard?" And you say yes. Why? Because think about it. You think you're gonna take this comic book just the way it is and take it home with no kind of protection, no cover, no bagging, no nothing, but you're just gonna grab it, throw it in your car, and just drive home? You know how many things can go wrong? So your comic book can be damaged by the time you leave the comic book store to the time you get home. Your best bet is to bag and board it. That's it. Now, there's things that you need to know about handling the comic. When you're touching a comic book, there's things you have to know. Okay, when you handle a comic book, you have to be delicate. Why? Because this is paper, and this is paper that you can easily damage and mess up. Now, over the years, the quality of a comic has changed. The papers have got thicker. They stopped doing newspaper type comic book pages. Now they have this sleek page where it's you can see it. You can see the page shining. Now, this became more of a thing in the last 35, 40 years. But I would have to say predominantly in the 90s is when comic books started switching over from newspaper to having slick paper just like this, where the papers can actually shine instead of it being made out of newspaper quality type paper, like old comic books were made from the 30s and 40s. Like I say, all the way going into the 90s. In the 90s, they kind of switched it. So yeah, there you go. See, and like the lovely Sherry just said, in a couple of things in life, always use protection. But of course, also in comic books, make sure you bag it. You know what I'm saying? Make sure you bag it. So appreciate that, Sherry. Thank you for having my back on that one. And my man Psychodorf 9 says, "Nah, man, part-timer, newbie, trainee." All right, I got you. But at least you knew that. So now the thing is this: when you're handling a comic book, when you're looking at it, if you're gonna lay it down on something, make sure it's on a clean surface. Don't sit it on your fucking coffee table where everything else has been on the kitchen counter, where everything else has been on, food, crumbs, bullshit, like dust, none of that. Make sure it's on a nice clean surface. And I'm gonna tell you something I've seen, right? I've seen someone handling comics, right? Now, follow me here with this. Always cover that slugger. And there you go, man. There you go, Psychodorf 9. Yeah, that's, from the one and only Psychodorf 9. There you go, man. Appreciate that. Now, I've seen people that, if you follow me here, they'll sit there and hold comic books, and while they're sitting there and they're thumbing through it, they'll do this. They'll do this, or they'll go, or they'll go like that. They'll take the comic book and bend it forward or bend it backwards. Don't you ever do that. That is the ultimate no-no. A comic book is meant to be handled from left to right. You don't ever, even in showing off, you don't go this and this and this and this. You don't fold when you fold the comic book this way, you've actually just destroyed your comic book. Don't ever do this to your comic books, ever. If for some reason you sat there and you thumbing through them and you just did like this, you just screwed up your comic book. Don't ever do that. So for anybody that's ever went through your comic books and you've done one of these numbers, you just screwed it up. And if it sounds like I'm being rough, I'm just being honest, and I ain't taking nothing back. It is what it is. Because if you don't understand it straight up, what you're doing, then you're thinking that however which way you're handling your comic book, you're handling correctly, and I'm here to tell you that you're not. You and basically, if you've handled all the comic books that you've ever owned that way, and you've thumbed through them, and you went like this with them, and all kinds of shit, just showing off, you just destroyed your whole collection. You didn't even know it. And that's the thing. How are you gonna know what it takes to handle and properly take care of a comic book collection if nobody has ever properly showed you or taught you? And that's the thing. I'm gonna tell you something. There's a lot of people collecting comic books right now. The one thing I've never seen anybody show anybody is how to properly handle a comic book. Because if you haven't properly handled a comic book the right way, that means you've been destroying all your comic books your whole life that you've been collecting all your comic books. You've been mishandling them because you don't know the proper way to handle a comic book, and you've basically been tearing up your own comic book collection. You might have every issue, but if you tried to sell it, they'll look at it and be like, nah, I ain't buying that. It wouldn't even matter if you have the whole collection. Why? Because all your comic books are beat up. And if you ever watch me handle comics, I'll sit there and I'll show you, hey, my comic is in mint condition. Because if I'm going to pay the kind of money that I'm going to pay for my comics, why would I want anything beat up? And maybe you've had a collection of comics, or maybe you thought you knew how to collect comics, but there's a proper way to collect comic books. And if you're a kind of person that you just like the books to read and you like the art or whatever, and you don't care what kind of condition that the book is in, then cool. Then you probably could skip through all this. But if you're a person that you interested in collecting comics and you want to collect comics the right way without destroying your comic book collection, then first off is twisting your comic book this way is not, you just wrecked your comic book. That's not how you handle a comic book. And again, if you never knew, then I'm here to tell you that that's not how you do it. And I've seen so many people do that, oh man, look, man, I got the whole collection of G.I. Joe. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh shit, you do have the whole collection. But then I'm seeing how they'll sit there and they'll be, look, I got issue number 1, I got issue number 2, I got issue number 3, I got issue number 4. And I'm like, damn, you just wrecked your whole shit. And I'm like, yeah, you got the whole collection. But then it's like, yeah, you got a whole collection of beat up comics that ain't worth shit. Sorry, but that's just being real. You know, you ever seen somebody say, "Oh man, look, I got a whole collection of GI Joes," and then when you go to your friend's house, you see all his GI Joes, dog fucking chewed them up. You know, all the paint's rubbed off of them. You know what I'm saying? The thumbs are all broken off. Don't even have a fucking kung fu grip no more. The weapons are all lost. You're like, yeah, you got all the GI Joes, but they're all beat the fuck up. They ain't worth for shit. Like, okay, cool, but and And that's the exact same way it is with comic books. So if you guys never knew what it actually took to actually collect a comic book, is more than just buying it. You know, again, once you figure out what you want to collect and it's time for you to purchase, first off, make sure your hands are clean. If you're going to be physically touching anything. And so now that we know how not to treat a comic book, let me show you how to properly handle a comic book. All right. So this is all shit coming out of my own personal comic book collection. So, you know, if I fuck up anything, it's on me. It is what it is. But this is for, you can say, training purposes, right? This is for, you know, to show y'all how to properly handle a comic book. Now, I showed this comic book off last week. Now, if you look at this comic book, once you see the corner, you see how it's flawless. There's no cracks. There's no creases in this comic book. Look at it. This comic book is in mint condition. It's in perfect condition. All right. Now, when you handle a comic book, you have to basically use your fingertips a lot. Unless you have it on a surface. But my surface is down here and I'm not going to be, you know, all that. So I'm holding it up high so you guys can see. Now, when you look at it, you have to look at all the corners. Make sure that the corners are not bent, beat up. Make sure that your spine is nice and clean. That's the first thing that you look for, is to make sure that the spine is not, you know, it ain't no cracks and no dents and no creases like this comic book. Now, if you look at this, you can see the cracks and the creases in here. You see that? You see that? When you see this in comic books, you do not purchase a comic book that is damaged this way. Good, bad. And the thing is, I have people showing me their comic book collection, but their comic books are beat up like this one. And you know, and the thing is, they'll come to me with comic books beat up like this, and will come to me thinking that their collection is on par with mine, when my shit is in mint condition with no flaws. You see what I'm saying? Like, look, you can see with the light glistening off the spine that there's no cracks, there's no creases. Look, even when you turn it on the back, look at that shit. There's no cracks and no creases on the back spine of this. You can see it for yourself. This comic book is flawless, in perfect condition. And so, now that you've recognized that your comic book is in mint condition, you handle it with your fingertips. Why? Because it's paper, it's delicate. And what you do is, when you open it, you know, there's a certain way to handle it, and you just have to be gentle with the pages. Now, I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm not going to tell you how long I've been doing this, but I've been doing this for a long time. So I know about being delicate when you're just turning the pages, and that's it. You just have to treat it like this thing is going to fall apart at any second. But you can't be so sensitive and so scared to touch it that you think you have to move it with tweezers. You know, this ain't surgery. You know, but it's simple. It's, you know, a lot of it's common sense. Wash your hands, be gentle. But then a lot of it's about, if how you handling it from page to page. You can sit there, you can read it, you can look at it. Make sure your hands are clean. If you're gonna sit it on the table, make sure it's on a clean surface. And when you touch it, you have to be gentle with your fingertips. Always handle comic books with your fingertips, because it's not a fucking hardcover book. You don't fucking grab it like if it's a coffee table book. It's not. What's up, Psychodorf 9? My brother says, firearm ain't been cleaned nor oiled in 1,000 rounds. Lost the box, hay, and spider in the barrel. I'm hit, brother. Just a different world. Yeah, I feel you. Exactly. Right. Right, exactly. That's, like it's the same thing in exactly. Right. You get it. So it's, but it's one of those things that if you know how to properly handle a comic book, you got to be gentle. I tell you, back when I was, in my late teens, I was a waiter, and I was a damn good one. And everything we did is we balanced everything. You remember, I don't know if y'all ever heard me tell you, I used to be a manager at Denny's. Well, it started off being a waiter first before I moved up to management. But one thing is, you handle a lot of shit with fingertips. And that's the same thing with comic books. You handle comic books with your fingertips. And another thing to consider is a lot of people have sweaty palms. A lot of people hand sweat. Now, if that's the case, you might want to consider gloves. You can get a fucking box of 100 for like $2 or some shit. Get you some gloves. If you're the type that has sweaty palms. Now, I ain't talking shit. People out there have that. So if that's the case, get you a box of gloves. But other than that, just got to be delicate with it. And another thing too is putting a comic book inside of a bag and backboard. It's these things are, it's not as hard as, again, I've been doing it forever. Comic book is still in mint condition. It's like, if you're going to take the time to purchase a comic book, take the time to treat it right. Another thing too is you never know which one of these comic books will ever be the one that can make a couple, be worth a little something. And, the majority of comics that are worth money are, of course, your older comics. Every now and again, you have one of your newer comics that would end up being worth something. And, you never know what that comic would be. So if you're sitting there and you're collecting comics, this is better off just to keep your whole collection in good condition. That way, if one of your issues become a key issue, then you've already done everything that you can. You got your comic book is preserved, and you're a proud owner of a key comic book. Shit, that's some good stuff. I mean, now when it comes to collecting comics, and of course, you're into buying your first comic. The one thing I would tell you is start off small. Again, don't buy a whole collection of comics. Why? Because you still have to get into the feel of collecting. Just because I sat there and I'm sitting there and I'm teaching you, hey, how to hold a comic book correctly, how to not mishandle a comic book, because that's the key to it. You whether you're buying it offline or you're buying it from the comic book store, you're purchasing your comic. Now, the thing is, if you're buying it from the comic book store, it's more of a hands-on experience. So you go and you're physically touching your comic. You're giving it to the cashier. You make sure you watch the cashier to make sure the cashier is not fucking up your comic while they're putting it in a bag or backboard, or they're putting it inside of a plastic bag to give it to you with your change and your receipt. And getting it home in one piece, and then once you have it home, making sure that you don't do anything to damage or destroy your own comic book while it's under your own supervision. And making sure that everything in your house doesn't destroy it either. Pets, kids, girlfriend, boyfriend, wife, husband, natural disasters. You gotta, if you plan to build your comic book collection, again, if you go back to my first video, you got to make sure that you keep it, out of harm's way of pets and animals. You don't want, dog pissing on it, shitting on it, or chewing it up. Kids will definitely destroy it, and they don't know no better. So it ain't their fault, but again, they don't know no better. And I advise you keep something like that up high. And that's, again, I recommend that with anything that's valuable. If you have anything that's valuable, don't leave anything that's valuable on the floor. Why? Because if you live in a state like Texas or Louisiana, what happens? Floods. So if you live in an area that floods possibly a couple times a year, why would you leave anything worth of value on the floor? You think how much stuff has been left before that's been damaged? Well, that'll be your comic books next. So don't leave your comic books on the floor. Anything valuable on the floor when you live somewhere that gets flooded. So sit on a table or sit it up high, like on a shelf or something. And again, man, sorry to break it to y'all, man. I know a bunch of y'all that collect, own comics, have collected. And again, if you've handled your comic books the way I showed here about 15, 20 minutes ago, then you know that, yeah, your comic books were actually messed up. So again, there's proper ways of handling comics. You have to be soft. You have to be delicate with it. Make sure your hands are clean. And then now that's all fine and dandy when you're at a comic book store and you're dealing with everything physically. But then what happens when you're buying stuff online? Now, that's the only other place that you'll be purchasing anything from, because if you're not buying it and it's not in front of your face, then basically you'll be going online to purchase your comics. And that's a whole nother ball game. I've done it plenty of times. And there's been very few times that I've bought a comic book that has came to me in a messed up condition. Oh, that's right. And make sure about leaving your stuff behind a lock. Yeah. And that's another thing too. Even if your stuff is locked up, make sure, just not to get off the subject of this, but there was a man one time that he had a comic book collection, right? And he had like Fantastic Four #1. He had some shit from the Silver Age, not Golden Age. He had some Silver Age, one like the first Fantastic Four, shit like that. Now, those comic books are worth money. There was a man that put his valuable comic books in a brand new safe. And it's supposed to have been airtight, the whole shit. When the man went into the safe, he put his shit in the safe, didn't mess with the safe for a while. When he went back into the safe and he saw his comic book collection, his comic books were destroyed. Now, the thing is, he sued the company that made the safe, and he won because, even with putting something in a safe, the safe was supposed to be guaranteed that nothing would damage whatever was locked inside of the safe. And his comic books got destroyed sitting in that safe. And he had all the proof to prove that the comic books were in great condition before he had put them in that safe, and that safe destroyed his comic books. So even in a situation like that, locking up your comic books in a safe is not a guaranteed way for your comic books to stay secured, because depending on what the safe is made out of, and and I think that's what it was. There was something inside the safe that ended up destroying the paper and everything inside those comic books. Now, if there's something like that inside of a safe, that man, he would have never known until he went back into that safe to see those comic books destroyed. Come to find out, it was the safe itself. So you got to be careful, even when you're sitting there and you're thinking that you're putting your comic books in a safe place. Make sure you look things over to make sure that it's really safe. Because even in a place like a safe, see what happened to that guy. So just saying, shit like that happens, and you have to be aware of these kind of things when you're sitting there and you're trying to put up your comic books. Make sure they're secure. Get you a comic book box. Get you a short box at first. The long boxes are harder to carry around. A lot of people just like dealing with short boxes. They're easier to move around if you got to move, or they're easier to stack up and stuff like that. Dark Knight had all of his comics stolen. I remember you telling me that. I think it was last week. That's very unfortunate. See, what it is. I'm gonna tell you sometimes. Well, I'm gonna tell you something. A lot of times when I figured out that somebody has stolen something from me, in the case of comic books, it was more than likely, it was always somebody that I knew, that knew what I had, regardless of what it was, and wanted it. Because even if it's somebody that's a complete stranger trying to steal something from you, a complete stranger doesn't know exactly what you have and where it's at. When someone comes and they steal your shit, and not a whole lot of things are turned upside down, and it looks like the person went directly to that place and took whatever you had, and now it's gone. More than likely, it's somebody that knew what you had and knew exactly where it was at. And from personal experience, every time I've dealt with a situation like that, it was because it was someone that I knew, that knew what I had and knew where I kept it. The one thing I realized is, as you get older, you don't always tell everybody what you have. And the last thing you do is is you tell you. And if somebody knows that you have something, that's fine that they know. But the thing is, you'll never tell them where you hide it. Like someone may know where you have a gun, that you own a gun, but do you think you ever tell anybody where the fuck your gun is supposed to be at? You don't do that. You don't ever let anybody know where your weapons are at. I had a homeboy that lost his life like that, and not for this video to switch gears, but this is one of those things. You don't ever let people know where your valuables are at. That's basically why I'm getting at. So, along with that is your comic book collection. If you're collecting your comics, they're your comics. Your best place, best thing to do with them is to get them out of harm's way and put them somewhere where they can't be destroyed, damaged, or stolen. Out of harm's way from kids or animals, and stuff like that. Yeah. So, but I'm just those are things to consider when you're sitting there and you're trying to collect comic books, and especially if you're trying to collect comic books that you enjoy and you're actually trying to hold on to them. I'm gonna tell you something. For the longest, the comic books that I collected were comic books that only I liked. It's when I was collecting comic books, the two comic book characters that I collected were the two most disrespected comic book characters, in my opinion. And I collect them both. Aquaman and Captain Marvel Shazam. And I collect them since I was a kid. And it's funny because I remember collecting those comics and people were like, "What do you collect?" "Oh, I collect Aquaman." They were like, "You collect what?" I collect Aquaman. They were like, and then again, Captain Marvel Shazam, people felt the same way about him. Like, "What do you collect?" "Captain Marvel." "Which one?" "DC Comics." They're like, "What?" So, and that was the thing. It was personal for me. When I collected comic books, it wasn't about a thing about collecting comic books for money. People would collect to try to see if they can flip comic books, and there's some money to be made in flipping comic books. But the one thing about comic books is that when it comes to anything that's valuable and you're trying to buy or sell anything that's worth of value, the only way a lot of this stuff is valuable is if it's worth it's only if it's worth it to the person that's purchasing it. And that's what a lot of things in life. You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. And that's that's my that's what I know. Comic books, give you an example. I could take a whole collection of comic books, take them to a comic book store, thinking that the comic book owner is going to give me a shitload of money for my Superman collection. This comic book store ain't going to give me shit for my collection. It's like a pawn shop. The only time you're going to sell some comic books and it'll be worth anything is if it's worth it to the person that you're selling it to, that wants to pay the price that you're charging them for. I can't stress that enough, man. I can't stress that enough. And hopefully you guys get where I'm coming from. Look, if you have any answers, any questions, anything you want to add on, you guys are more than welcome to ask me anything you like. If there's something that you wanted to know about collecting comic books that no one's ever answered, no one's ever told you, even if it comes to how to handle a comic book correctly without destroying it, because probably a lot of people have been touching comic books and don't even know how to properly hold one. To the point where every time you probably touched a comic book, you were probably destroying it every time you touched one your whole life. But how would you know if no one was to sit there and show you how to properly hold and handle a comic and turn and flip its pages and show you how a comic book is supposed to be? A comic book only bends one way. So again, if somebody's showing you a comic book and they're thumbing through some shit and they're going like this, they're destroying their comic books. This is not how a comic book is supposed to be held and bent and handled. You don't do comic books like that. When you hold the comic book, the only way a comic book is supposed to turn is like this. It's this way. That's it. This the only way a comic book is supposed to turn. Is like this. That's it. It's supposed to bend at the spine like that. That's it. That's the only way a comic book is supposed to be handled. When you sit there and you take a comic book and you do like this to it, you just screwed up your shit. And if anybody that have seen comic books being handled that way, they don't know how to properly collect comics. I mean, you can collect the comic. Anybody can collect. But are you, is your comic book in proper collecting condition to where it's like you can take your comic book collection and sell it off to anybody, and they'll sit there and buy it just on the strength of how great of condition it is? Nah. You know what? You could probably have all the comic books that anybody could ever want in the world. But if someone was to give me X-Men #1, the first X-Men comic ever created, and they gave me X-Men #1, the first X-Men comic from the 1960s, and they gave it to me just like this, do you think I would want it? If someone said, hey, look, man, this X-Men #1 here, you want it? Do you think I would want it? You think I'd take it? I'll take it and I'll look at it. I'll be like, hey, that's cool, but you just fucked it up. So that's the thing. A lot of people can say, hey, I got the whole X-Men collection. But if you treated your whole X-Men collection like it was a piece of shit, then your collection ain't worth nothing. That's the thing. People think that just because you physically own something, that is worth something. It ain't worth shit. Just because you physically own it doesn't mean a thing. You physically own it, but you treated it like it was garbage. And just because you did that, your comic book ain't worth anything. So you might have the whole collection, but your whole collection is not worth a thing because you treated it poorly. I don't make the rules. And you can say, hey, you know what? I hear what you're saying, but it's still my collection, blah, blah, blah. That's true. Do what you like. It's still your collection, the whole nine. But when you put it, like you could have a collection like that. If you take your collection and put it next to mine, you already know whose collection is going to be on top. And I mean, it might even get to the point where some people might be like, well, damn, if that's the case, then basically I've been collecting comic books all this time. And that's the thing. A lot of people think that just because you collect comics doesn't mean that you've been treating your comic books correctly. You got people that have been collecting comic books for decades. But you know what? For decades, they've been mishandling their books. I don't know what to tell you. You know what? That's the craziest thing. I seen people collect comic books for decades and never knew how to properly handle them. That means they have decades worth of comic books that ain't worth shit. Fucked around, spent 30, 40 years buying Batman comics, and your whole Batman collection ain't worth a shit. Why? Because you treated them all like it was like, because you treat them all like this. It's like, you know, so, and that's it. This is the honest truth on comic book collecting. You know, and that's the thing. It's when you get your hands on some comic books, how are you treating them? Because if you treated them the way I just showed you, how, you know, if you're sitting there and you're doing this to your comic books like this, then you just wasted all your money. And hopefully you learn something from this video to where the next time you buy comic books, you're not wasting your money. So, and that's the thing, you know, I'm all about trying to help someone. If you want to get your collection together, come holler at your boy. Now this is how to collect comic books, buying them for the first time, getting your hands on them, physically knowing how to properly handle a comic gently. You see how this one, this is newspaper. You see, you see that this is the old style of comic books where it comes on the newspaper kind of paper, and even then you can see the paper is starting to tarnish. You see that the paper is starting to turn like a brownish kind of color. That lets you know that this comic book was sitting out in somebody's garage in the weather. Because I have newspapers that are over 20 years old, and they look like they were just pressed yesterday. Why? Because the newspapers that I own, I've kept them in great condition, and they've never sat in a garage. The paper's still white. So when you see paper that's brown like this, that lets you know that this has been sitting in somebody's garage, and the weather has tarnished the paper in this comic book. So that's what taking your comic book collection and sitting in the garage, that's what this does. It does exactly what you see here. So you don't ever take your comic book collection and put it and sit it in the weather out in the garage. You know, winter, spring, summer, and fall, your comic book sitting in the garage somewhere, dealing with the heat, dealing with the cold, dust, dirt, all kind of shit. And boom, your comic book's getting, you know, over time, it's tarnishing. And that takes away value from your comic book as well. So, you know, hopefully, look at that shit. Look. Now, you see that? You see those cracks and creases in the comic book on the spine? That's a no-no. If you ever see anything like that in a comic book, you don't ever purchase a comic book that's damaged like this. Because it's not worth your time and it ain't worth your money. Look at that. You can see all those cracks and creases on the spine. No, you don't purchase comic books like that. So again, you starting to see what it looks like to buy comic books that are damaged, that are weathered. Like, like these are all kinds of signs, no-nos. Look at that, man. The witching hour. Actually, this is on the level of fucking like Tales from the Crypt and shit like that. So, to be honest, I would love to have had this comic book in mint condition. But it came to me all beat the fuck up, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to use this to show people that this is not how you, like, if you have a comic book that's beat up like this, then if you keep it for sentimental values or just for the story itself, I understand that. But if you're going to keep a comic book like this and think that you're going to sell something damaged like this for any kind of money, you can kiss that shit goodbye, because ain't nobody going to buy it. And if somebody wants to buy it, they're not going to give you anything for it. Why? Because it's beat up. Man, I wouldn't give nobody shit for this comic. That's me. I'm just saying. So, yeah, there's a lot to learn on comic books. Shit. Look at that corner. You see that corner? Look at that shit. Look at that. Look at that, man. This shit's all ate up in the corner. You see that on top of the DC? Look at that. Look at that spine. You see that? You can see all those damages in this comic. You see all the hard bends in that. Like, this is what you don't ever want to purchase. Is a comic book that's damaged like this. And to be honest, when it comes to collecting comics, there's a grading system. Starts off from a 0 all the way to 10. And 10 being mint condition. So, of course there's good, very good, fine, very fine. There's mint, near mint. And there's a grading system when it comes to, all these comics. And you definitely always want your comic books to be a 9 if possible, a 9 and up. But if you can get your comic books to be an 8, then that's even better. And I know me personally, when I get comics, I want all my comic books to be in mint condition, and I'm looking at anywhere between like between a 9 and a 10. Like, look, I'll give you an example. Like, I'll show you this. Now, you see this? This is mint condition right here. Look at that. There's no cracks. There's no creases on this. This thing is perfect. Look at that. This thing is in perfect condition. Now, look at that. Like I say, you can see there's no cracks, there's no creases. You can see as the light comes off of as light hits this right here, you can see it's all smooth. There's no cracks, no creases, no bends. This thing is perfect. This comic book is in mint condition. And again, always make sure that you keep your comics bagged up. There you go. So Psycho, Penny, Sherry, Thought. If anybody has any questions, anybody has anything to throw at me, holla at your boy. Or if there's something that I didn't explain fully, let me know. What's up, Mike? Got Mexican Iron Man in the house. Missed you, big bro. How you doing, man? Hopefully everything's good with you. All right. Okay, Mexican Iron Man has a question. Which are the best plastic sleeves for me to buy a pack of? Well, okay. To be honest, they have a few different ones. Depending on what, if you're buying them for older comics, they if they, of course, they go by size. So I know with me, I have a mix. I have a mix of everything. I have like a one for Golden Age, because of course I have my few Golden Age comics. Then I got the Silver Age, and then I have your current plastics. Well, now it all depends. Are you trying to buy they have like the 100 packs, and now they have it in different sizes, and of course they have different companies. But if you're if you have mainly like Bronze Age comics, all like comics from like the 80s all the way to now, then you can basically get your oh, what's up, Nick? How's it going? Mixon Arman says, Sherry. There you go. My brothers. What's up, Nick? Hopefully everything's good with you. But yeah, they have the 100 pack, and you make sure that you get the acid free. Make sure whatever you get is acid free. Why? Because what we've starting to learn, like in the last like 10 years, is that a lot of us have been keeping our comic books bagged up with the same bag and backboard for like the last 20 years or so. And when you finally really get to pulling those comic books out, you get to see that on the backboard there's like a yellow discoloration, and sometimes you get to see what's on the back side of the comic book being imprinted onto the backboard. That you put into your plastic sleeve. So, at that point, you got to make sure that whatever you get is acid free. Make sure, and acid free, to be honest, only costs like an extra like $1 or $2 more. You better off getting the acid free everything. That way, when you bagging and boarding your comic books, you don't have to worry about your comic books. You're not worried about the acid, actually eating away at your comics. So okay, so I should get the acid free. Got it. Yeah, there you go, man. And get the acid free. And again, depending on what size comics you have, like if they're newer comics, then they have them by shape. Like current size comic book bag and boards, and so basically you have them. See, like these are two different kinds right here. This one actually is a bag and backboard, but if you notice, it's pretty snug on the comic. And then you have some that have more of like a barrier on it, like it has more room. It's more loose fitting. So some people prefer the comic books to be a little bit more loose fitting, and some people prefer for the comic books to be tight like this. You know what I'm saying? Like you can see the difference. Yeah, here you go. Shit. You can see the difference, man. So, but acid free is the way to go, brother. Always, man. Lord Thought says, hell, add 32 flavors of Nick Weiser and Mexican Iron Man. There you go. And Mexican Iron Man says, yes, that's exactly the problem I have on. So I should replace all of mine with the acid free. Got it. Thanks. Yeah, man. That's, and, and I'm be honest, if you're ever seen like Az and Nerdrotic do the bagging and boarding the comic books, that's basically what they were doing. Like, they would sit there and they were actually reboarding a lot of the comic books because of the same problem. So they were transferring the comic books over to acid free, or they were doing that, or they were buying new comics. So they were like, when you watch them do the bag and boarding comics the way they used to, they were doing two things. They were either reboarding comic books that they already had, taking them from screwed up bags and boards and putting them into acid free bags and boards, or you were seeing them basically unboxing like they would have just bought like a whole run of comics, and what you were watching them do was sitting there and taking their newly purchased whole collection. They'll have like a whole run of Conan or some shit. You sit there watching them, taking them and bagging them up individually. You know what I'm saying? And that's what they were doing. They were doing one or the other every time that you watch them do that. So, shit. Hey, yeah, says, hey, Thoth. Yeah, everybody saying what's up to my man, Lord Thoth. And Nick Weiser says 24 laying out the advice on comic book collecting. Yeah, if you rewind this some, I was also showing how to actually handle, like, how do you actually handle and touch comic books? And I was showing all that. When you handle comic books, you got to do it by your fingertips. Make sure your hands are clean, and make sure that if you're laying a comic book down, make sure it's on a clean surface. And and I mean, even little things like touching your face and shit like that. Your face is oily. And sometimes your hands sweat. So you got to make sure that your hands are clean before you touch comic books, because you end up leaving fingerprints on those nice covers. And guess what? The fingerprints don't come off of your comic books. So if you hold your comic book long enough, and then you let go and you look at the cover where you were just holding it, and you see your thumbprint in the cover, it's in there. And at that point, you just ruined your comic. So there's a lot of things you have to sit there and consider. How to keep a comic book in mint condition. Making sure that your comic books are always bagged and boarded. Make sure that you have tape. Make sure you tape your shits up. There's all kind of stuff, man. So 32 Flavor says, love hearing this. Yeah, man. I've been going for an hour and 20 minutes about. So, but yeah, there's all kind of things to consider. And when I come back next week, this whole thing was, what do you do when you finally decide to purchase a comic and you're physically touching a comic, going into a comic book store, you decided on what you wanted to buy, and you're actually touching a comic book, that when you sit there and you're looking at a whole bunch of comic books sitting, on a rack, make sure that before you purchase anything, you're looking at the corners, you're looking at the binding, making sure that there's no creases or no cracks, because once you buy it and you walk out the door, they're not refunding your shit. So you got to make sure your comic book is 100 before you walk out the door. So you got to sit there, you got to check it out. And when you're purchasing the comic book, like when you pick it up and you're looking at it, you got to know how to hold it, how to flip the pages. And again, I'm sitting there, trying to show people that I don't know what the fuck I just did with the shit, but yeah, if you're shit, I don't know what the fuck did I just do. I guess I must have just did something, but there's certain ways how to handle and collect comics. And a lot of people think that if your comic books still have creases and cracks in them, like this comic book does, that it's worth something. And a comic book beat up like this ain't worth shit. And the only time a comic book can be beat up like this, and someone would spend high dollar to buy it, is if it's something that's, it's got to be something old and something that you would, even if it's beat up, the whole world will still want it. There's not a whole lot of things that you can actually throw in that category. You know what I'm saying? So '24 just got my replacement set of Green Lantern Rebirth 1 through 6. That's awesome. You know, Green Lantern Rebirth, I have issue, I think it's 1, 3, and 4 autographed by Ethan Van Sciver. Matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, Stone Loki, our brother Loki bought me issue number 1 or he bought me issue number 1 autographed by Ethan Van Sciver. Yeah, my brother. Yeah, that was wow, that was like about 6-7 months ago when he bought me that. Yeah, that was I sure appreciate that, man. Appreciate you, Loke. My man. Low Spickle in his laptop. What's up, brother? So yeah, man. Teaching people, you know, again, you see people handling comic books and they're thumbing through comic books like this. That's a big no-no. Don't ever handle comic books like that. Comic books aren't meant to be turned this way. Don't ever do that. And I know I've said it like 6-7 times throughout this whole live stream. I'll continue to say it because people don't even understand. When you collect the comic book, you gotta open it accordingly. You know, that's the only thing that bends. You gotta bend it at the spine. You don't do a comic book like this. All right. It's crazy because this is an Authority comic. Ooh, James Gunn, the Authority. I don't give up. Yeah, look at that. You know what? I got my theory on the Authority. You guys never seen the Authority? That's them. I got my theory on why James Gunn picked these guys. Like, no shit. And I'm not even trying to get off. I know this is to learn comic books, but since we're on the subject, I think I know why he picked the Authority, man. And I think it goes beyond it being, well, it's a great comic book and it's a great this and that. I think I know why he picked it, because it's going to check all the boxes. I'm going to tell you something. If you want to see woke done right, or possibly as best as ever, it's going to be with the Authority. Why? Because you're going to see the shipping. You're going to see all kind of shit. They're going to be checking off every box, and it's going to be under the guise of a superhero movie, and it's going to be able to pull off all the woke shit that all these other movies and these companies have not been able to pull off. The Authority is going to be the one to do it in every fashion. And just because it's going to be done with a James Gunn style of flair and everything else, that he's going to try to make it as palatable as possible. And it's going to check every one of the boxes, man. And that's why the Authority is going to come out. And the Authority is going to do what every woke superhero movie has not been able to do. Why? Because it's already woke, and it was woke before its time. But the fact that they're going to bring it up to the forefront in today's era, the Authority is going to do something on the level of wokeness that we've never seen before, and it's probably going to have a chance of pulling it off just because of who's involved. I'm being for real, man. If nobody's ever touched the Authority is going to be the woke superhero group team shit that it's gonna be done right. The action's gonna be good. The story's gonna be fucking whatever. But these characters are gonna be fucking woke as shit, and it's all gonna be palatable. It's gonna be woke done right because you got James Gunn behind it, man. And just think, man, the Authority checks off every fucking box in every way possible, and it's gonna be a superhero team done by James Gunn, dude. I don't even know what to like. Just the possibilities of how this thing is going to come off like something like what their version of Batman and Superman in love with each other. Like, dude, this thing is going to be it's going to be interesting to see. I tell you that, man. So, and I think that's the look. Who else could you? The thing is, you couldn't even do that with any other group. Looks like the Authority is probably the only group that you could really pull that off with. Y'all be ready, man. Y'all be ready. My man, Mike, makes an Iron Man says, I got so many new indie comics. I need to get a second spinner rack at this point. I don't even have one spinner rack. I need a spinner rack. I need an old school one, like the one like Ethan has, that has like the old comic book logos on the top. Some good shit. Love you, Sherry says, hey, Mike with the heart. What? Lucky Mike. My internet girl. There you go. You guys are awesome, man. Lord Thought says good perspective. Hey, man. Boy, I tell you, when it gets closer to what we're going to see from the Authority, boy. Because the thing is, dude, all that, all that, like now you're talking shit, like all that LGBTQ superhero shit, dog. That's going to be at the forefront, man, of all this stuff, man. What's up, Zax? Got my brother Zax in the house, man. Yeah. So, the Authority. But yeah, that's my Authority rant. That's what I've always thought. Like, why pick the Authority out of everybody? Why? Because that's the one DC team that's already the Authority has already been what it's been. So it was already woke before woke standards, before woke became a thing. And now that the Authority basically represents, oh my goodness, man. The Authority is probably going to be, it's going to be woke, and it's going to be everything that we can't stand, but it's going to be fixed in such a way that when you see a lot of folks in the fandom like, oh shit, I like this. What could you say, man? It's going to be interesting, man. It's going to be interesting. Hey, man, peace out to you too, man. Thank you, Zax, my brother. Yeah, so, but yeah, man, look, I'm going to be on for about another about 5 more minutes. Been on for about an hour and a half already. And I've basically dropped everything that I know to consider and to think about when it comes to collecting comics. Now, again, if there's any questions, comments, anything that you want to ask, and this is everything about buying comic books physically with the comic book in front of your face. Now, when I come back next week, we'll be talking about purchasing comic books online. Now, purchasing comic books online is a whole nother ball game because you're not physically seeing the comic book in front of you. So you have to you have to know how to really know what to look for to know if you're making a worthwhile purchase or not. And if you're a person that's just starting to collect comic books, how would you know if what you're buying online is the real deal or not? There's a few things to consider, a lot of things to keep in mind. And we'll definitely, because buying shit online is a whole different ball game than buying something in front of your face. In front of your face, you know spot on what you're getting. Now, it's a little trickier when you're purchasing online, but it also helps when you're purchasing from a trusted source. And you're always supposed to do your homework. Make sure that, you know, this is not a new buyer or somebody, you know, that has, you know, no kind of recognition online of doing good or bad business. You know, there's a lot of things you have to consider. So, you know, and that's a whole nother, like I said, that's a whole nother ball game. Everything that I discussed today is how to collect comic books and have a straight up collection, a real collectible collection, comic books in mint or as mint condition as possible. You know, for you to have a full fledged, true comic book collection that can, you know, that can hold its own against anybody's comic book collection. You know, this is how we're starting. So, Lord Thoth, my brother says, heading for grub night, everybody. Hey, man, thank you for being here, Lord Thoth, man. And, man, you have a great night. Be safe, man. Have a good dinner. And I look forward to catching up with you next time. Hopefully, mañana, which is tomorrow in Spanish. And Mastasina, right? Mastasina Akita. Huh. Mastasina Akita. My first time seeing you here. Great to have you here. And thank you for being here. Mastasina says manga begins the story at number 1. Yep. And comics gotten too crazy for me. I can't keep track of it all. I mean, what is good, what isn't good, where did the quality dip down? You know, to be honest, depending on what comic book collection it is, if it's something that I personally know, I would be able to help you out with that. If it's something that, you know, that I've collected, then I can tell you, well, you know, shit was hot when this person wrote this comic book from this issue to this issue. And then the comic book started dipping from this issue to that issue because another writer came in or a whole another creative team came in. Then, you know, that's, you know, those things happen, and you know you can always review. To be honest, if it's a comic book that's already been released, and you know, let's say if it's a comic book that's already been released, and the comic book had 50 issues, and I know 50 is not a lot, but I'm just kind of, you know, and it had 50 issues. And basically after the first 2 years, you know, after like issue 24, 25, the comic book started dipping, you know, you can go back and actually review that comic book in its run, you know, like review like issue 1 through 10. There'll be people that would actually review the comic and tell you, you know, that a certain book was good or it was solid all the way up to a certain point. And then, you know, to be honest, when it's a very liked, you know, character that's loved by a lot of people, when they have a run that actually starts to dip, then a lot of people start, you know, a lot of reviewers start telling you, hey, look, at issue 35, this comic book started, you know, going to shit because this happened and that happened and this character died and this writer decided to do this, you know, go in this creative direction, which totally threw off the whole book. You know, people that enjoy that same character will let you know, hey, right around this mark, this comic book started fucking up. And, you know, and if people are being honest about it, then they'll definitely let you know. All right. What's up, Zax? Everybody saying what's up to everybody. Yeah, actually, you can wait a year or two, and in that way, and look, there's another thing I noticed. If it's a new comic book and it's a current comic book, I'll give you an example. Right now, there's a run of the Justice League that's going right now. It has to be, if I'm not mistaken, this run of the Justice League has to be like in this issue 80. Like it's in like the issue 80s right now. It's like 80, 83, 84, 85, something like that. It's in the issue 80, because in issue 75 of the Justice League, they killed off the Justice League. And that was like what, not even 8 months ago or some shit. So yeah, 8, 9 months ago, they killed off the Justice League, and that was Justice League issue 75. So right now it has to be about issue 83, 84, 85. Now, in collecting that run of the Justice League, you could have been a person that sat there every month from issue 1 and bought it issue by issue by issue, and you'd have spent your $4 or $5 every month that you had bought that Justice League comic book. Or you could have been like me, like what I did about 2 years ago, right before I started doing a whole bunch of unboxing comic books. I went and I bought a small run of Justice League comics, and I bought the first 15 issues for like $10. I bought the first 15 issues of that Justice League run that's running right now for $10. Well, actually, I spent like 15 because it was $5 for shipping and handling. So you'd be surprised that after a person is sitting there buying a run of comics for a year or two, that they're sitting there and they're looking at it, and they sat there and they spent $5 each comic. So with me, I would say I got about $75 worth of comic books for $10. And if anybody has sit there, and if anybody has saw me buying comics, and I used to do all these unboxings, Lord Thoth, Mexican Iron Man, I think Zach's seen me a few times doing some unboxing. If they'll tell you that I was sitting there and I was fucking getting comic books, I was getting comic books that were 40, 50 years old, that were worth $20, $30 an issue. I was getting these issues for $1 or $2 each. I got them right here in the next room. So my whole point is, you can actually wait a little bit, go back and revisit, just say, hey, you could see, you could put in, let's say, Justice League lot of, Justice League lot of comics, and you put like the year, and people would sell runs of comics, and you'd be surprised that for as much as these comic books were worth issue for issue, how much somebody would sit there and just sell you 10. They'll sell you 10 of these comic books that is easily worth $50 worth of comics, sell it to you for like $10, $15. Here you go. Man, I got hundreds of comic books that way, and I unbox hundreds of comic books like that. Boy, and I'm telling you, I have so many comic books to back that shit up, man. And I know it. I've done it. And I've looked lately. So now that I'm getting back into comic books to actually do this kind of thing, I'm starting to see how much they're starting to price comic books. I'll give you an example. Do you remember about a week ago, James Gunn tweeted out about the Terrifics? I don't know if anybody kept up with that. James Gunn tweeted out a picture of the Terrifics. If anybody doesn't know who the Terrifics are, they're a team in DC Comics made up of the leader, which is Mr. Terrific, which is an Earth 2 character. So it's Mr. Terrific's the leader. You got Plastic Man, Metamorpho, and you have Phantom Girl, and she's from the Legion of Superheroes. So you got these 4 abstract superheroes that go through these missions like the Fantastic Four, and it's a very fun comic. It's a very, very fun comic book. And James Gunn posted a picture of the Terrifics. Do you know before he posted a picture of the Terrifics, issue number 1 was going for like $2 or $3? Right now, a week later, issue number 1 is going for $20, $25 if you can find it. So my whole point is, just because of a tweet, a comic book went from being $2 or $3 to being fucking $20, $25 a week later. You can't look up the Terrifics. Anybody that's listening to me, look up DC Comics or DC The Terrifics and tell me what you find. You ain't gonna find shit. Everything's gonna be so overpriced. But a week ago, you could have found the whole collection for like $15. That comic book's been out since 2018, 2019. The comic book only had 27, 28 issues. It was a short run of comics. And there's a lot to there's a lot of things to consider when collecting comics. I kind of went off on a tangent. Apologize about that. But yeah, to be honest, every few months check back to see what kind of deals you see on the collection of comics that you're looking at. Shit. I mean, if I would have known, I would have I'd be more than happy to help you if you need some help. That's what I'm here for. Lady Miss, how you doing? The first lady of the channel, how you doing? Great to have you here. I've been talking about collecting comics. I've been talking about collecting comics, so I'm so happy to have you here. Hopefully you're doing well. Coming in saying what's up to everybody. Yup, $5 a week. Yup. Yeah. So, and that's the thing. Comic books are expensive. Comic books are fucking expensive. $5, $6 a issue. That's a lot. That's a lot. So you'd be surprised. A lot of people are trying to be minimalists. People are trying to give away their collections. So you just have to look. And like the thing with me is I have the ability to look beyond Amazon, eBay, and shit like that. I'm a part of, there's like this group of like hundreds of comic book collectors, all a part of this group. And they fuck around and they do auctions and they do all this shit and it's just a group of just comic book collectors. And I'm talking about hundreds of them. And I found a way to get in and constantly get updated and see what the fuck. And I'm telling you, when I was sitting there doing unboxings of these comic books, I was getting my comic books from these guys. That's why I was getting the comic books that I was getting, and I was unboxing. Again, if Zax was there, I think Zax was there. He's me unbox a few comics. I mean, shit. Man, I miss that shit, man. Miss having new comics to unbox. It was fun. Yeah, it was fun. So says, "Ooh, good deal. I like good deals." Yeah, there's a lot of them out there. You just have to know. You have to know where you're looking. There's a lot of good deals out there in comic books, y'all. And if you're checking this out for the first time, you don't know what I'm talking about or what's going on. I started a series yesterday talking collecting comic books 101. I dropped the first video last week, and this is my second video. Last week's video was everything to think about and consider before you spend one penny to even buy one comic. Everything that I could have ever thought about. And then this one is now that you made your decision, you want to collect comics, this is what you want to do. Now that you're focused on what you want to get, what to do. How do you handle a comic book? Make sure your hands are clean. All these other things. Make sure that the guy that's ringing you up is not beating up your comic book while he's trying to charge you $5 for your comic book. Even before you buy the comic book and you see it on the whole rack, make sure that the comic book's not beat up. Because a comic book owner, even though if a box of comics come in beat up, comic book owner still wants his money. He'll sit there, take a whole box of beat up comics, brand new but beat up because it got destroyed or something happened during shipping. He'll take that whole stack, fucking put it on the rack, and try to sell it to you and expect you to buy it. You got to be aware of that kind of shit. So even before you buy a comic, you're sitting there and you're looking at a whole stack of comics on the rack at a comic book store. You have to make sure that the shit's in perfect condition. Because the minute that you walk out the door, you're not getting your money back. So if you don't fix it right then and there, you're stuck with that comic. And this wouldn't be nobody's fault but your own. So to avoid all that, we make sure that the comic book is in mint condition 100. And, and again, proper ways on how to handle a comic. When you fucking handling a comic book, you do not bend a comic book this way. Why? Because you are destroying your comic book. That's not what you do. There's ways to properly handle a comic. You got to hold it with your fingertips. You got to be gentle, got to be delicate. You got to, make sure that, you're gentle with the pages and shit. You know what I'm saying? It's simple. You got to be patient. Comic book normally takes about maybe a half an hour to read if you're taking your time. And whatever you do not eat and drink while you're reading your comic. Why? Because if you got a Coke, your Coke sweats, you get that perspiration, that water on your comic, you just fucked your shit up. And if you're eating, you're dropping crumbs on your food. Potato chips are greasy. You're fucking touching your hands. You're touching your comic book. You got to be conscious about this kind of shit. So basically, when you're fucking with comic books, make sure you clear the table. Your table's clean. Your hands are clean. There's no oil, no grease, nothing around that's going to fuck up your comic. Why? Because if not, you just wasted your money. What's the purpose of you buying a comic? Why? So you can take it home so you can fuck it up? What you going to do that for? You got to think about this kind of shit, man. Here you go, man. We all love great deals, brother. I like those kind of deals. Wait till the good stuff. Yep, collect together. Yep, and then get an awesome deal out of it. Yeah, and the thing is, you won't always find it. You just got to keep looking for that. Everybody won't give a deal, but there's a lot of people that will. Yo, you were, yeah, man. Those were the days, man. That was about a good year and a half ago, brother. Shit, just think, man. We came a long way, man. Shit, you came a long way, brother. Zach's is whooping ass. Shit, if you ain't subscribed to Zach's, I don't know what you're doing with your life. I'm sorry, I don't know what you're doing with your life. Good artists can do wonders, of course, man. And definitely a good artist, good writer, given the right material, of course, man. You've hit the nail on the head. Bad artist, though, can burn through a title. True, man. I mean, you know what? A good artist can make up for an okay writer, to make a book passable. But if you have a good writer and the artist sucks, then people won't stick around just for the writing because it'll be like an eyesore that you're reading a good story, but the art is just trash. Like, people couldn't take too much of that, man. Oh yeah, that's right. We got the whole crew in the house. I like that. Everybody's here. Yep, I like that. So, again, if you guys have any questions, any comments, anything you were wondering about, feel free to ask. Definitely in the next, I got 9 more minutes left. Don't really, about 8, because I've been sitting down for about 2 hours. I got to get up and move around. It's not good for me to stay seated for too long, but it is what it is, man. It comes with the territory nowadays. So, but yeah, if you guys have any comments, any questions, please feel free to fire. I would love to. Oh shit, you guys are firing like a motherfucker. Hold on. All right. It says I remember you unboxing classic Western comics, cowboy stuff. Yeah, I still got them. I was doing Rawhide. I got original, like I have a Marvel Rawhide. I was doing Jonah Hex. I was also doing the Two Gun Kid. I was doing those, and I had look. Now I got those in mint condition, man, dude. If you see, man, it's funny because I was just looking at those comic books earlier today, man. I was kind of going through some of my short boxes, and I ran through like Rawhide, the Two Gun Kid, and dude, man, those old school Marvel Westerns, those things were in mint condition, man. People were fucking damn near giving them away, man. It's like I couldn't believe, man, like. I'm paying like $1.25. I was paying like, dude. Last time I even paid for a comic book that cheap, man, when it was when I was a fucking kid, man. And it's like to sit here and be spending $1.25 for a comic book. I was like, wow. And this is a comic book that came out like in the late '60s, early '70s, and I'm like, mint condition, and people just like. And people were just trying to get rid of stuff, man. Like, they just didn't give a fuck what it was, man. It's like, here, you want an old comic book from the 1960s? Here, $1. It's like, psh. And again, man, buying comic books online. Come back next week. I got a whole conversation for that one, man. That's a whole the good and the bad, the good, bad, and the ugly with shopping online for comic books. You see a comic book, you see the picture of it looking one way, and you like, oh shit, this comic book looks perfect. Fuck around, you purchase that shit. You once it shows up, you're like, hell nah. Like, man, what the hell? This ain't this comic book. I couldn't, like, there's been times I had to sit there and send comic books back, and I'm fucking fighting on somebody on eBay on the comment section. Me and I'm fighting with the store owner and shit, and fucking eBay has to be the mediator. Like, come on, man. Like, I've been there a few times, man. This shit happens, man. It comes with the territory with buying shit online. It's just one of those things, man. But it happens. When you find that one comic few heard of, to be honest, I could find comics, man. And I found some pretty I found some needles in the haystack kind of comics, man. To be honest, like, I mean, I remember unboxing some stuff, and I remember like Zax and Lord Thoth and a few other folks looking like, damn, you found that? And I was like, yup. Old Green Lanterns, from the 1960s, Justice League comic books from the first original run, from the 1960s, Flash comic books from the night, Wonder Woman comics from the 1960s. Shit. Yup, that Rawhide, man. Oh shit, my alarm just went off. Hold on a second, I'll be right back. All right. I'm good, shit. But yeah, man. Let me see. I gotta see if we're doing the comic book roundtable today, man. All right. Well, I got a show to do in 54 minutes. Just got the word that we're doing the comic book roundtable. So I'm gonna have to get off here in a minute and do this comic book roundtable. Look, for you guys that don't know, I'll be joining Stone Loki and Clobbering Times over on Loki's Mornings of Mischief. If you haven't subscribed to him, please do. We have a show over there called the Comic Book Roundtable, where we'll be discussing comic books, new and old, what's going on, comic book movies, cartoons, video games, whatever. And we have some things to talk about, man. So, yeah, and next time I come on, Zach, I'll show you. I'll show you my my Western comic book collection, man. And shit. I don't know if you remember, Zach's. Like I got the first original run of Star Trek comics. From like Golden Key. Like I got like the first original run of Star Trek comics from like what I think it was like 1970, 71. Now, stuff like that. I mean, I remember I was unboxing a bunch of those. So, dude, I got so many comics, man. So many comics. Like the first appearance of the Huntress, that's worth a pretty penny. The first appearance of Power Girl, that's worth a little something. I got the first appearance of Stargirl. That's worth a little something. The first present day Black Adam, worth a few $100. Captain Marvel #1, the original Captain Marvel from Marvel Comics. That kind of shit. There's a bunch of stuff, man. I got all kind of stuff, man. But look, you guys check me out over there. I look forward to seeing y'all over there. Hopefully, you guys will come check us out over at Loki's Mornings of Mischief. But yeah, I got to get going. I got to get up and move around and get ready to sit down for another hour or two, in about an hour. So let me get up, get the moving around, get some blood circulating through me, grab me something to eat, and get myself ready for the comic book roundtable. So for all y'all that came here a little late, you want to see what I was talking about, please rewind this, take this to the beginning, check it out. Everything that you need to know about purchasing a comic book. The moment you walk into a comic book store, physically seeing a comic book in front of your hands, ways how to handle it, ways how not to handle it, what to look at when you're purchasing it, making sure that you check out the cashier, make sure the cashier ain't beating up your comic book before you leave out the store, all kinds of stuff. So, yeah. So, everything you need to know about collecting comic books, check out Collecting Comic Books 101 with your boy 24/7. Put out my first video last week. Live stream video, whatever. Did that last week. Now this is the second one, and it'll be a series so that we can all know how to correctly collect comic books. So I had a fun time, had a great time being here with y'all, and thank you all for all the love and support and everything you guys have done for me. I'm very appreciative. Thank you all for giving me your time and spending this time with me. Man, time is valuable and it's precious, and I'm just thankful that you guys are here with me. So with that, I want to say that I love you guys. I thank you all, and I appreciate y'all, and I look forward to catching you all on Loki's Mornings of Mischief here in 50 minutes. So hopefully I'll see y'all there, and if not, you guys have a great evening, and I love y'all, man, and y'all be safe, take it easy, and I'll be catching y'all here tomorrow because I'll be streaming again tomorrow and dropping videos. There's a whole bunch of shit to talk about. So with that, I love you guys. Y'all take it easy, man. Y'all be safe. And thank you, Lady Miss. You're awesome, man. Zax, Master Cena. Man, look, you got to let me know how to spell your name, but thank you for being here, man. You're awesome. Hopefully I see you again. It was great meeting you. And thank you for being here and being a part of being here with us, man. So thank you. And I appreciate you all for being here, man. And you all are always welcome, here in my house, man. I love you guys, man. And just enjoy the rest of your evening. And Lady Miss, in the next week or so, that book project that I was working on, I'll be getting with you and Lord Thoth, and just let you know personally, thank you for that. And I appreciate you. And I will be asking, for your help on help me with that book, man. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. So with that, just want to tell everybody, thank you all, man. I love y'all, man. And y'all be easy. And y'all have a good night. Peace, y'all.